My name is Isabella, and I'm 28 years old. 2 years ago, I thought I had my entire life figured out. I was engaged to my college sweetheart, living in a cozy apartment we decorated together, planning a wedding that was supposed to be the start of our fairy tale. But sometimes life has other plans. Sometimes the person you trust most in the world shows you exactly who they are when you need them most. The accident happened on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. I remember every detail with crystal clarity: the smell of coffee brewing in our kitchen, the sound of Marcus humming in the shower, the way my engagement ring caught the light as I grabbed my keys. I was driving to my job at the marketing firm downtown when a delivery truck ran a red light and slammed into the passenger side of my Honda Civic. The impact sent my car spinning across 3 lanes of traffic. Glass exploded everywhere. Metal twisted like paper. In that moment, suspended between consciousness and darkness, I thought about Marcus. I thought about our wedding dress hanging in the closet. I thought about the children we'd planned to have. I thought my story might be ending before it really began. I woke up 3 days later in intensive care with a shattered pelvis, 2 broken legs, and a traumatic brain injury that left me struggling to remember simple words. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. But lying in that hospital bed, machines beeping around me, I didn't feel lucky. I felt scared and broken and desperate for the one person who was supposed to love me through anything. Marcus visited every day for the first week. He brought flowers and sat beside my bed reading to me from magazines. He held my hand when the physical therapy sessions made me cry. He promised we'd get through this together, but I could see something changing in his eyes. The way he looked at me was different, like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Before I tell you about this life-changing decision, hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal that might just change how you see your own relationships. The turning point came during my 2nd week in the hospital. I was learning to walk again with a walker. My steps were shaky and uncertain. My left leg dragged slightly from nerve damage. I looked up at Marcus, expecting to see pride or encouragement in his face. Instead, I saw pity, and something else that made my stomach drop: disgust. That night, he didn't come to visit. When he finally showed up the next evening, he had dark circles under his eyes and couldn't meet my gaze. He sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside my bed and said the words that would change everything. "Isabella, I love you, but I can't do this." His voice was barely a whisper. "The doctors say you might never walk normally again. Your memory issues might be permanent. This isn't what I signed up for when I proposed." I stared at him, processing what he was saying. The man who had promised to love me in sickness and in health was walking away because I was too damaged, too inconvenient, too much work. "What about our wedding?" I managed to whisper. "What about forever?" He pulled off his own wedding ring and set it on the bedside table next to my water cup. "I'm sorry, but I need to think about my future, about what kind of life I want, and I can't see myself pushing a wheelchair for the rest of my life." Those words hit me harder than the truck that had nearly killed me, because the truck was an accident. But this betrayal was a choice, a deliberate decision to abandon someone at their lowest moment. After he left that night, I cried until no more tears would come. Then I made a decision that would define the rest of my life. I decided that if the person who claimed to love me most couldn't see my worth, then I would prove it to myself and everyone else who had written me off. I had no idea that decision would lead me to rolling up to my former workplace 2 years later in a silver Rolls-Royce, watching Marcus's jaw drop as he realized exactly what he'd thrown away. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I got there. Because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about rediscovering your own strength when everyone around you expects you to crumble. It's about learning that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the catalyst for the best things that follow. Have you ever had someone abandon you when you needed them most? Drop a comment and let me know. Your story matters too. To understand how devastating Marcus's betrayal was, you need to know about my family. We weren't wealthy, but we were close. Or at least I thought we were. My parents divorced when I was 12. Dad moved across the country for work and gradually faded from our lives. Mom remarried 2 years later to a man named David who already had 3 kids of his own. Suddenly, our quiet house of 2 became a chaotic household of 6. David's children were older than me. Jessica was 16 and already planning her escape to college. The twins, Michael and Matthew, were 14 and seemed to communicate only through sports metaphors and inside jokes. They weren't mean to me, but they weren't particularly welcoming either. I felt like a guest in my own home. Mom tried to blend our families, but it always felt forced. She'd plan elaborate dinners where we'd all sit around the table sharing highlights from our day. David would nod approvingly while his kids talked about their accomplishments. When it was my turn, I could see everyone checking their phones or staring at the ceiling. The dynamic became clear pretty quickly. David's kids were the real family. I was the add-on. This became painfully obvious during my senior year of high school when I was accepted to 3 different colleges. Mom and David sat me down at the kitchen table with serious expressions. David cleared his throat and explained that they'd been running some numbers. College was expensive. They'd already committed to helping Jessica with her master's degree, and the twins with their undergraduate programs. "We think you should consider community college for the first 2 years," Mom said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's more practical, more affordable." Meanwhile, Michael had just gotten a brand new car for his 18th birthday. Matthew was planning a spring break trip to Europe with his friends. Jessica was getting her apartment rent paid while she completed her graduate program. I worked 3 part-time jobs to pay for my own education. I lived in the cheapest dorm on campus and ate ramen noodles for dinner most nights. But I did it. I graduated with a degree in marketing and landed a good job at a respected firm downtown. That's where I met Marcus. He was charming and confident in a way that made me feel special. He noticed me in meetings when others overlooked my ideas. He laughed at my jokes and remembered small details about things I'd mentioned in passing. For the first time in years, I felt like someone's first choice. We dated for 3 years before he proposed. The proposal was perfect. He took me to the botanical gardens where we'd had our first date. He got down on one knee beside the rose garden and said I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever known. I cried happy tears and said yes immediately. Planning our wedding became my favorite escape from work stress. I'd spend evenings looking at venues and flowers and dress designs. Marcus seemed just as excited, talking about our future home and the trips we'd take on our honeymoon. We picked a date for the following spring. Everything felt like it was finally falling into place. My family's reaction to our engagement was typically lukewarm. Mom seemed pleased but distracted. David nodded approvingly and made a joke about finally getting me off their hands. The twins barely looked up from their video games when I showed them my ring. Jessica offered to help with wedding planning, but then got busy with her own life and never followed through. I told myself it didn't matter. Marcus loved me. That was enough. His family welcomed me warmly. His mother already called me daughter and insisted I call her mom. His father joked that Marcus had better treat me well or he'd have to answer to him. I felt more accepted at their dinner table than I ever had at my own. When the accident happened, my family visited the hospital. Exactly twice. Mom came the day after I woke up, stayed for 20 minutes, and left because David was waiting in the car. Jessica sent a get well card. The twins never came at all. Marcus's family, on the other hand, brought meals and flowers and sat with me when Marcus couldn't be there. His mother held my hand during the hardest physical therapy sessions. His father researched the best rehabilitation programs and made calls to specialists, which made Marcus's abandonment even more crushing. If his own family could see my worth, why couldn't he? That question would haunt me through the darkest months of my recovery, but it would also fuel the determination that ultimately changed everything. After Marcus left, the hospital room felt impossibly quiet. The machines kept beeping, but somehow everything sounded muted, like I was underwater. His parents came the next day, and I could see the shame in their eyes. His mother cried and apologized for her son's behavior. His father looked like he wanted to punch something. "This isn't how we raised him," his mother whispered, squeezing my hand. "You'll always be family to us, Isabella. Always." But their kindness only made the betrayal sting worse. If they could see past my injuries, why couldn't the man who claimed to love me? The real shock came when the insurance settlement arrived 3 months later. The delivery truck company's insurance offered a substantial payout to avoid a lawsuit. Suddenly, I had more money than I'd ever imagined, enough to change my life completely if I was smart about it. I was still using a walker and dealing with memory issues that made simple tasks frustrating. The doctor said my physical recovery would be slow but steady. My cognitive function was improving, but I'd always have to work harder to remember things that used to come naturally. That's when I met Dr. Sarah Chen, my neurologist. She was brilliant and direct in a way that reminded me of myself before the accident. During one of my appointments, she mentioned that she'd started her own medical consulting practice after being passed over for department head at a major hospital. "They said I was too young, too inexperienced," she told me. So I proved them wrong. Sometimes the best revenge is massive success. Her words stuck with me. I started researching business opportunities that would work with my limitations, something I could build gradually while I continued healing. That's when I discovered affiliate marketing and online course creation. I was already experienced in marketing from my old job. I understood target audiences and conversion strategies. But now I had something else, a story that people would remember. The woman who rebuilt her life after losing everything. I started small. A blog about recovery and resilience. Social media accounts documenting my journey. I was honest about the struggles but focused on the victories, no matter how small. Learning to tie my shoes again. Remembering my mother's phone number. Walking to the mailbox without my walker. People responded to my authenticity. The blog grew. I started getting sponsorship offers from companies that made adaptive equipment and recovery tools. I created an online course about rebuilding your life after trauma. Within 6 months, I was making more money than I'd ever earned at my corporate job. But the real game changer came when I met Thomas Rodriguez at a networking event for entrepreneurs with disabilities. He was a former investment banker who'd built a successful consulting firm after losing his sight in a car accident. He took one look at my business model and said I was thinking too small. "You're not just selling products," he told me. "You're selling hope, and hope is priceless." Thomas became my mentor and, eventually, my business partner. He helped me scale my operations and diversify my income streams. We launched a podcast that went viral. We wrote a book that hit bestseller lists. We created a nonprofit foundation that provided grants for adaptive equipment. Within 18 months, my net worth had multiplied beyond anything I'd dreamed possible. But money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was proving to myself that I was capable of more than I'd ever imagined. I moved out of my cramped apartment into a beautiful house with wide hallways and accessible features. I bought a car with hand controls that gave me complete independence. I hired a personal trainer who specialized in adaptive fitness and got stronger than I'd been before the accident. The memory issues were still there, but I'd learned to work with them instead of against them. I kept detailed notes and used technology to help me stay organized. My slight limp had become barely noticeable, and most people never realized I'd been injured unless I told them. Throughout this transformation, I thought about Marcus constantly, not with longing, but with curiosity. What would he think if he could see me now? Would he regret his decision? Would he try to win me back? I was about to find out. Because my old company had invited me to speak at their annual conference about overcoming obstacles in business. The same company where Marcus still worked. The same building where we'd first met and fallen in love. It was time to show everyone exactly what they'd underestimated. Do you believe that everything happens for a reason? Tell me in the comments what you think about second chances and comebacks. The morning of the conference, I stood in front of my full-length mirror adjusting my navy blue power suit. The woman staring back at me bore little resemblance to the broken person who'd left this company 2 years ago. My hair was styled in a sleek bob. My makeup was flawless. My posture was confident and strong. But my hands were shaking as I picked up my car keys. I'd debated for weeks about what car to drive to the conference. My practical Honda would send one message. My new BMW would send another. But Thomas had laughed when I mentioned my dilemma. "Isabella, you're not trying to blend in anymore," he'd said. "You're trying to make a statement, so make it loud." That's how I ended up behind the wheel of a silver Rolls-Royce Phantom, courtesy of a luxury car rental service that catered to high-end clients. The leather seats smelled like success. The engine purred like a satisfied cat. Every detail screamed money and power and choices. As I pulled into the company parking lot, I saw familiar faces doing double takes. Former colleagues stopped their conversations mid-sentence to stare. A few people pulled out their phones to take pictures. I parked in the visitor spot closest to the main entrance and took a deep breath. The conference was being held in the main auditorium where I'd sat through countless boring presentations. But now, I was the one on stage, the keynote speaker. The success story they'd invited to inspire their employees. I was scheduled to speak at 2 o'clock, but I arrived early to mingle during the networking lunch. I wanted to see the looks on people's faces when they realized who I was. I wanted to gauge reactions before the formal presentation. The first person to approach me was Jennifer from HR. We'd been friendly but not close when I worked there. Her eyes widened as recognition dawned. "Isabella. Oh my God. Is that really you?" She looked me up and down, taking in my expensive clothes and confident posture. "You look amazing. I heard about your accident. We were all so sorry." "Thank you," I said graciously. "It was a difficult time, but it led me to discover opportunities I never would have found otherwise." Word spread quickly through the crowd. People who'd barely noticed me when I worked there suddenly wanted to chat. They asked about my business, my recovery, my new life. Some seemed genuinely happy for my success. Others looked suspicious, like they were trying to figure out how the quiet marketing associate had transformed into this polished entrepreneur. But I was scanning the room for one face in particular. I spotted him near the coffee station, talking animatedly with a woman I didn't recognize. She was laughing at something he'd said, touching his arm in a way that suggested intimacy. Marcus looked exactly the same. Same sandy brown hair that fell across his forehead when he got excited. Same crooked smile that had once made my heart race. Same confident posture that had first attracted me across a crowded meeting room. He hadn't noticed me yet. I took a moment to study him. This man who'd thrown away our relationship because he couldn't handle having a damaged girlfriend. Who'd abandoned me when I needed him most because I wasn't convenient anymore. I felt no flutter of attraction, No residual love or longing, just a cold satisfaction at what I was about to do. I walked directly toward him, my heels clicking confidently, on the polished floor. The woman he was talking to saw me first and nudged him. He turned around, and I watched his face cycle through confusion, recognition, and shock in rapid succession. "Hello, Marcus," I said, my voice steady and professional. "How are you?" His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The woman beside him looked between us with obvious curiosity. "Isabella," he finally managed. Wow. Look." He gestured helplessly, clearly struggling for words. "Different?" I suggested with a slight smile. "I suppose I am." "I heard you were speaking today. I couldn't believe it when I saw your name on the program." He was staring at me like I was a ghost. "You look incredible, really healthy and strong." The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the same man who'd told me he couldn't imagine himself pushing a wheelchair for the rest of his life, who'd walked away because my injuries made me inconvenient. "Thank you," I said. Recovery was challenging, but it taught me valuable lessons about resilience and self-worth. The awkward silence stretched between us until the woman beside Marcus cleared her throat. She was petite with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, sorry," Marcus said, seeming to remember her presence. "Isabella, this is Amanda. We're together now." Amanda extended her hand with obvious reluctance. "Nice to meet you. Marcus has mentioned you." I shook her hand firmly, noting her expensive manicure and designer dress. "All good things, I hope." "Marcus told me about your accident," she continued, her voice taking on a patronizing tone. "It's so inspiring to see you doing so well despite everything you've been through." Despite everything. As if my success was surprising rather than earned. As if I should be grateful for their pity rather than proud of my accomplishments. "Thank you," I said evenly. The accident was the best thing that ever happened to me, actually. It showed me who really mattered in my life and helped me discover strengths I never knew I had. Marcus's face flushed red. He knew exactly what I meant. "Listen, Isabella," he said, stepping closer and lowering his voice. "I know things ended badly between us. I've thought about reaching out to apologize, but I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me." "You're right," I said simply. "I wouldn't have." He flinched like I'd slapped him. Amanda looked between us with growing understanding and discomfort. "I should go prepare for my presentation," I continued. "It was nice meeting you, Amanda. Marcus, I hope you're happy." I walked away before either of them could respond, my head held high and my heart surprisingly light. That interaction had been easier than I'd expected. Marcus looked smaller somehow, less significant. The man who'd once held the power to devastate me was just another face in the crowd. My presentation went perfectly. I talked about resilience and reinvention, about finding opportunity in crisis and strength in vulnerability, about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who see your worth even when you can't see it yourself. The audience gave me a standing ovation. Several people approached afterward with business cards and collaboration offers. My former boss asked if I'd consider coming back as a consultant. The same boss who'd sent flowers to the hospital but never offered to hold my job while I recovered. "Thank you, but no," I said politely. "I've built something bigger than I ever could have imagined here." As I walked back to my Rolls-Royce, I felt someone following me. I turned to see Marcus hurrying to catch up, looking flustered and desperate. "Isabella, wait!" he called out. "Please, can we talk privately?" I stopped beside my car, one hand on the door handle. "What about Amanda?" She's not you," he said, running his hands through his hair. I made a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. Yes, I agreed. You did. I was scared, he continued. The doctors said you might never fully recover. I didn't know if I was strong enough to handle it. I panicked. I studied his face, seeing the regret and desperation there. 2 years ago, these words would have meant everything to me. I would have forgiven him instantly and begged him to come back. Now they just made me feel sorry for him. Marcus, you showed me exactly who you are when things got difficult, I said gently. I'm grateful for that honesty, even if it hurt at the time. But I love you, he said, reaching for my hand. I never stopped loving you. I stepped back, avoiding his touch. No, you don't. You love the idea of me. You love what I've accomplished. But you didn't love me when I needed it most. His face crumpled. Is there any chance? Could we maybe start over? I opened my car door and slid into the driver's seat. The leather was warm from the afternoon sun, and the interior still smelled like luxury and possibility. I hope you find happiness, Marcus. Real happiness. But it won't be with me. I drove away without looking back, watching him shrink in my rearview mirror until he disappeared entirely. That night I called Thomas to tell him about the conference. He laughed when I described Marcus's reaction to seeing me. Revenge is a dish best served with a Rolls-Royce, he said. But it wasn't really about revenge anymore. It was about closure. 1 year later, I'm sitting in the sunroom of my new house, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold through floor-to-ceiling windows. It's been 3 years since the accident that changed everything, and I barely recognize the person I used to be. My business has expanded internationally. We've helped thousands of people rebuild their lives after trauma. The foundation Thomas and I started has funded adaptive equipment for over 500 individuals. My book hit the New York Times bestseller list and stayed there for 12 weeks. But the real victory isn't financial. It's the peace I feel when I wake up each morning. It's the certainty that I'm living authentically, surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not what I can do for them. I think about that conversation with Marcus often. Not because I miss him, but because it represented such a complete transformation in my self-worth. The woman who'd begged him not to leave me was gone. In her place stood someone who knew her own value and wouldn't accept less than she deserved. My relationship with my family has evolved too. After seeing my success, they suddenly became much more interested in staying connected. Mom calls regularly now and brags about my accomplishments to her friends. David mentions my business expertise at dinner parties. The twins actually read my book and told me they were proud of me. I appreciate their efforts, but I'm not desperate for their approval anymore. I've learned to see their limitations with compassion rather than resentment. They're doing the best they can with their own fears and insecurities. The most unexpected blessing came 6 months ago when I met Dr. James Morrison at a medical conference where I was speaking about patient advocacy. He's a neurosurgeon who volunteers with our foundation and shares my passion for helping trauma survivors rebuild their lives. James saw my scars during our third date when I was self-conscious about wearing a dress that showed the surgical marks on my legs. Instead of looking away, he traced them gently with his finger and said they were proof of my strength. These aren't flaws, he told me. They're evidence of battles you've won. That's when I knew I'd found someone who truly understood that our wounds don't make us less worthy of love. They make us human. They make us real. We're engaged now and planning a small wedding for next spring. It will be nothing like the elaborate celebration I'd planned with Marcus. This time, I only want people there who've proven their love through both good times and bad. James's proposal was perfect in its simplicity. We were hiking one of my favorite mountain trails, taking our time because I still can't move as quickly as I used to. He stopped at a scenic overlook and said he wanted to spend his life helping me conquer whatever challenges lay ahead. There were no grand gestures or expensive rings, just a simple promise between two people who understand that real love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up consistently, especially when things get difficult. I still use my platform to share stories about resilience and reinvention, but now I also talk about finding love after betrayal, about learning to trust again after someone breaks your faith in human goodness, about recognizing the difference between someone who loves you for what you can give them and someone who loves you for who you are. The accident that I once thought would end my story actually became the beginning of my real life. It stripped away everything superficial and showed me what truly mattered. It taught me that I was capable of far more than I'd ever imagined. Most importantly, it taught me that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what you're really worth. If you've made it this far in my story, I want you to know that whatever you're facing right now, you're stronger than you realize. The people who leave when things get tough are making room for the ones who will stay and fight beside you. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something better? Drop a comment and share your story. This community is built on supporting each other through difficult transformations. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about overcoming life's biggest challenges. Your engagement helps these messages reach people who need to hear them most. Remember, you are not defined by what happens to you. You are defined by how you choose to respond. And you always, always have more strength than you know. Thank you for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next video.